I used to believe that being careful was a kind of armor. I never jaywalked, never clicked suspicious links, never borrowed money I couldn't pay back, and I apologized to furniture when I bumped into it. My job as a compliance analyst in a cramped Bangkok office trained me to treat the world like a spreadsheet full of hidden fees. Every promise needed a clause. Every smile needed a footnote. The universe, apparently, hates cautious people. 1 minute, I was proofreading a supplier contract at 2:11 a.m. The next minute, my screen flashed white. A pressure snapped behind my eyes, and my coffee tasted like pennies and thunder. Then a calm voice that sounded like an elevator announcement said, "Welcome. You have been assigned to a role with a 92% mortality of reputation." I tried to laugh, but my throat was full of static. "Role? What role?" "What?" the voice replied. "Assistant to the designated scapegoat. Please enjoy your new narrative responsibly." When I opened my eyes, the ceiling was not my apartment's peeling plaster. It was a geometric chandelier that looked like frozen lightning. The air smelled of citrus polish and expensive silence. I was lying on a carpet soft enough to qualify as emotional support. Somewhere nearby, a violin practiced the same 3 notes, as if trying to remember how grief worked. I sat up too fast and immediately got hit by a wave of information that did not belong to me. A name tag that read Lena KEW, a bank account that screamed negative numbers, and a job schedule that had more red flags than a parade. In this world, Lena was the personal assistant to the hotel's fixer, a man hired to absorb blame when powerful guests needed something ugly made tidy. The fixer's name was Maris Vane, and according to the memory dump, he had vanished last night after a private meeting on the 47th floor. The last person to enter the suite before the security feed cut to black was, of course, me. My stomach sank in a straight line. I had been reborn as a human alibi with legs. A translucent panel blinked into view above my palm like a holographic receipt. Title: Margin. Status: Active. Rules: Convert waste into value. Rewards: Protection, leverage, and occasionally cash. Penalties: Exposure, debt escalation, and public humiliation. A progress bar sat at 0, which felt insulting because I was already suffering. Underneath, a line of smaller text scrolled by. Tip: The wealthy do not pay for services. They pay to avoid discomfort. I looked around the room for hidden cameras and found a mirror instead. My reflection was a woman in a neat black blazer, hair pinned into a severe bun, eyes too awake for the hour. On the desk beside the bed lay a tablet displaying a guest list, and the names were the kind you saw on billboards, lawsuits, and philanthropic galas. A knock came at the door, soft but confident, like someone who had never waited for permission. I stood, adjusted the blazer out of habit, and opened it to find a bellhop with tattoos peeking from his cuffs and a smile sharpened by boredom. "Morning, Lena," he said. "If you're still breathing, you're already doing better than Maris." The bellhop introduced himself as Kiet, though the memory I inherited insisted he was temporary staff. Temporary. My foot. His eyes moved like he was scanning for exits, and his posture had the relaxed readiness of someone who'd been chased for sport. "Maris is missing," he whispered, stepping inside without being invited. "Security is pretending not to notice. Management is pretending not to panic. And the guest in suite 4702 is pretending he didn't order something that can't be ordered." He flicked his gaze to my name tag. "You're the only one with keycard access to the floor, which means they're going to hand you to the wolves and call it professionalism." I swallowed. "I want to lodge a complaint against the wolves," Kiet snorted. "You can try. The wolves are donors." The margin panel pulsed, and a new objective appeared. Reduce exposure by acquiring 3 sources of leverage before noon. Leverage. Great. I had wanted a nap and maybe a quiet life. Now I needed blackmail like it was a vitamin. The Eclipse Meridian Hotel sat above the city like a polished threat. Its lobby was all marble, orchids, and people who moved as if the air owed them passage. I walked through it with my borrowed confidence and my very real fear, pretending that the tightness in my chest was just good posture. The first source of leverage arrived by accident, which is how most disasters begin. A housekeeping cart rattled past me, pushed by a petite woman in a plain uniform, head down, face half hidden behind a mask. As she turned, a gold bracelet slid from her sleeve custom, engraved, unmistakably not staff issue. Our eyes met, and for a split second, she looked like she might sprint. I did the opposite. I lifted my hands and said quietly, If you're not supposed to be here, neither am I. Her shoulders loosened a millimeter. You're Lena, she replied, voice too educated to belong in linen storage. The assistant everyone blames. I sighed. My reputation travels faster than my paycheck. She pushed the cart into a service hallway and motioned for me to follow. Name's Nara, she said, and I'm not staff. I'm hiding from my father's board meeting. That sounded like rich people hide and seek, but the fear in her eyes was honest. I need leverage, I admitted. Do you have any lying around? Nara's mouth twitched. I have a family. We manufacture it. Nara led me into a linen closet that smelled like bleach and secrets. She pulled off her mask, revealing immaculate makeup and the kind of face that magazines call fresh, while quietly meaning expensive. My father is hosting a private negotiation on the 47th floor, she said. He's using the hotel's Predictive Concierge system to pressure a rival into selling a company. The system isn't just about room service. It profiles people, forecasts what scares them, and then the hotel sells the fear back as comfort. My stomach did a small flip. That feels illegal. Nara laughed without humor. It's only illegal if someone writes it down and then survives. The margin panel shimmered. Opportunity detected. Obtain proof of algorithmic coercion. I stared at her. Do you have proof? Nara tapped her bracelet. I have access. I also have a conscience that shows up when my father isn't looking. She hesitated. Maris tried to stop him last night. The name landed like a dropped tray, and now Maris is missing. I finished. Nara nodded once, sharp. If you want to live through today, you'll need allies who can disappear people. Or allies who can stop disappearances. Preferably both. Leverage source number 2 came with steam and chili. I found it in the kitchen, where the executive chef, Auntie Pim, ruled like a benevolent dictator wielding a ladle. The memory dump had labeled her difficult, which in corporate language usually means not easily exploited. She stared at me over a cutting board piled with herbs, her eyes narrowing. You, she said. Maris's little shadow. I raised my hands again, because apparently that was my new brand. I'm only a shadow if someone blocks the light, I replied. Auntie Pim made a sound like a suppressed laugh. Cute. Are you here to blame the kitchen for something? Not today, I said, stepping closer. I'm here because someone ordered a meal last night for Suite 4702. Something off menu. Her knife stopped mid-chop. Off menu? She repeated, tasting the words like poison. That guest asked for a dish from a province I grew up in. Not the flavor, not the ingredients, the exact dish my mother used to make when she was trying to apologize. Pim's jaw worked. That dish isn't in any cookbook. Only my family knew it. The hair on my arms lifted. So the system found it, I whispered, and used it. Pim's eyes went flat. Maris asked me to write down everything the guest said, word for word. And I did. I put the note where no one looks. She pointed to a dented rice cooker in the corner, like it was a safe. Proof. But if you take it, you owe me something. I didn't even hesitate. Name it. Pim leaned close. If this burns down, make sure the staff don't take the fall. The margin panel chimed. Leverage acquired. Testimonial and time-stamped note. My progress bar jumped, and for the first time, the system felt less like a threat and more like a tool I might swing back. Leverage source number 3 was the hardest because it came from my own reputation. I needed access to the 47th floor, and the only person who could grant it was the hotel's security director, Saran, a man built like a door and just as friendly. He met me in the surveillance room, surrounded by monitors showing 100 angles of people pretending not to be watched. He didn't offer a chair. You're not supposed to be here, he said. Maris is missing, I replied, and I'm tired of being the easiest explanation. Saran folded his arms. The easiest explanation is usually correct. I exhaled slowly, reminding myself that being polite to furniture did not prepare me for being polite to hostile muscle. Then look at the footage, I said. Not the cut one. The raw feed. I know you have it. You're a security director, not a magician. His eyes flicked, just once, to a locked cabinet. That tiny movement was my opening. The margin panel pulsed. Convert fear into leverage. Offer an exchange. I leaned in and lowered my voice. If I go down, the hotel's story becomes staff misconduct. If the hotel goes down, your pension goes down with it. Help me, and we can make it executive overreach. You get to keep your badge. I get to keep my head. Saran stared at me for a long moment, as if deciding whether I was brave or stupid. Finally, he slid a key onto the table. 1 hour, he said. If you're caught, I don't know you. I picked up the key like it was a live wire. Perfect, I said. I don't know me either. On the elevator to the 47th floor, my reflection wobbled in the mirrored walls. The hotel's soundtrack played soft piano that made every heartbeat feel like a confession. Kiet stood beside me, hands in his pockets, as if we were headed to brunch instead of a potential trap. Nara was behind us, pushing her borrowed cart like camouflage. Pim's note was tucked into my blazer lining, warm against my ribs. The margin panel displayed a new warning. High-risk zone. Narrative instability detected. I tried to ignore it, but the words burrowed into my brain. Narrative instability sounded like the universe's way of saying, we might change the rules mid-game. The doors opened onto a hallway so plush, it felt like walking on someone else's money. Suite 4000. 702's door was guarded by 2 men in suits that matched their blank expressions. I stepped forward, holding my name tag at a practiced angle. Room integrity check, I said, in the tone of someone who had never been questioned. One guard's eyebrow rose. That's not scheduled. I smiled, bright as a lie. Nothing is scheduled when donors are involved. It was a gamble, but rich people's favorite magic trick is believing that rules bend for them. The guard hesitated, then swiped his card. The lock clicked. My lungs unclenched by a fraction. We slipped inside as the door shut behind us with the sound of a judge's gavel. The suite looked like a showroom for power. Panoramic windows, a bar stocked with bottles whose labels were practically signatures, and a conference table set with tablets and paper, as if someone wanted the illusion of tradition. A man stood at the window, hands clasped behind his back, watching the city like it owed him dividends. He turned, and his smile was polite in the way knives are polished. Lena, he said, as if we were old friends. I wondered when you'd come. My inherited memories screamed his name. Dr. Harlow Gray, founder of a health tech empire, rumored to be half genius and half lawsuit. I kept my face neutral. You requested an integrity check, I replied. He chuckled. I requested privacy. The hotel promised me a system that would keep my negotiation clean. His gaze slid to Kiet, then to Nara, and finally to me. Yet here you are, a missing fixer, a disguised heiress, a bellhop with secrets. It's almost charming. My skin prickled. He knew too much, which meant the hotel's system wasn't just predicting. It was spying in real time. The margin panel flashed red. Immediate threat. Reputational execution in progress. Harlow walked closer, and his cologne smelled like cedar and bad intentions. Maris made a mistake, he said softly. He tried to renegotiate my comfort. I don't like renegotiation. Kiet shifted, his body a coiled spring. I spoke before he did something heroic and terminal. Where is Maris? I asked. Harlow's eyes glittered. Safe, he said, and then added, safe from being useful. That sentence felt like a door slamming somewhere deep in me. I had spent years being useful until it hurt. I was done letting someone else define the price of that usefulness. Nara's voice cut in, steady despite the tremor in her hands. The system isn't yours, she said. It's the hotel's, and my father doesn't get to weaponize it. Harlow's smile widened. Ah, Nara Suthida, the runaway heir, your father will be disappointed. He tapped the table, and one of the tablets lit up, displaying a dashboard labeled Eclipse Concierge, Predictive Compliance. Underneath were profiles, guest names, psychological markers, vulnerabilities. One profile was mine. It listed fear of public shaming, high tolerance for overwork, and instinct to apologize. I felt nauseous. It knew me better than my own therapist would have, mostly because I couldn't afford a therapist. Harlow leaned forward. You see, he said, this isn't about room service. It's about control. People behave when you touch the right nerve. He flicked his finger, and the screen shifted to a live social media feed. A headline was already drafted. Hotel assistant suspected in executive's disappearance. My name, Lena Caillou, sat beneath it like a coffin plaque. I can publish that in 60 seconds, Harlow said, or I can delete it. I'm offering you a choice. The margin panel hummed, almost gentle. Choice detected. Convert coercion into contract. I laughed, surprising myself. It came out sharp. You think this is a choice? I said. This is a hostage note with better lighting. Harlow's eyes narrowed, and in that fraction of a second I understood something. He wasn't used to people refusing to act afraid. His power depended on predictable reactions. The system predicted I could become unpredictable. I stepped toward the tablet and placed my palm on the glass. Let's negotiate, I said, as if we were equals. You want comfort. I want survival. The hotel wants plausible deniability. You're trying to buy silence with humiliation. I nodded toward the drafted headline. That's expensive. It costs you time, lawyers, and a reputation for cruelty. Investors don't like cruelty when it's obvious, Harlow scoffed. Investors like results. Investors like clean stories, I corrected. And your story gets messy if the staff you frame happens to have evidence. I pulled Pim's note from my blazer and held it up like a small flag. Your off-menu request. Time-stamped. The dish only the chef's family knew. Your system harvested it. That's coercion. Keat slid a flash drive onto the table with a casual flick. Raw security feed, he said, voice lazy. The cut that shows who entered and who edited. Saren's key had unlocked the truth, and Keat, apparently, was the kind of bellhop who could turn truth into a portable object. Nara lifted her bracelet and tapped a hidden clasp. Admin access logs, she said. My father's signature, your requests, and the algorithm's output. Harlow's expression didn't crack, but his pupils tightened. For the first time, he looked less like a man and more like a spreadsheet that didn't balance. The margin panel chimed. Leverage threshold exceeded. Initiate counteroffer. I breathed in, tasting the metallic fear, and then I made my offer. You will release Maris, I said. You will retract the false story, and you will sign an NDA that binds you more tightly than any hotel towel. In exchange, we do not destroy you today. We simply remove your access to the system. Harlow laughed once, low. And why would I accept? I stared at him. Because if you don't, I said, you'll learn what it feels like to be a convenient narrative. For a moment, the suite was quiet except for the hum of air conditioning and the distant city noise that sounded like 1,000 tiny deals. Harlow's hand moved toward his pocket, and Keat's posture changed instantly. I raised a finger. Don't, I said. Not at Keat, but at the universe. No melodrama. The margin panel flickered again, and a new function appeared. Waste audit. Identify redundant threats. A list scrolled across my vision, security guards, legal intimidation, social media draft, locked service elevator, next to each, a percentage labeled, removable friction. I didn't know whether to scream or thank the system. I chose action. Keat, I murmured. Service elevator. Now. He nodded and slipped out, moving like a shadow that had learned to bite. Nara, I said. Send the logs to 3 independent outlets. Schedule the release for 10 minutes from now. That's our insurance. Nara's fingers flew over her bracelet interface. Done, she whispered. Pim's note? I asked. I've already photographed it, she replied. Harlow's gaze darted between us. You're bluffing, he said. Am I? I replied, and let my voice soften. Because softness can be a weapon too. Dr. Gray, you're a man who buys silence. I'm a woman who has lived on silence. The difference is that I've learned how loud it becomes when you stop holding it in. His jaw clenched. On the tablet, the countdown on the drafted headline paused, then reset. Someone in the hotel's network had noticed the disturbance. Somewhere else, alarms were probably being ignored in the name of discretion. Harlow exhaled through his nose. You're making enemies, he said. I smiled. I'm making boundaries, I corrected. Enemies are just people who dislike boundaries. The door to the suite opened abruptly, and Saren stepped in with 2 security officers behind him. His expression was the same, but his eyes had the haunted look of a man walking into a story he didn't write. Dr. Gray, Saran said. There's been a system anomaly. We need to confirm guest safety protocols. Harlow's composure snapped back into place. Of course, he said smoothly. I was just explaining to Lena why loyalty matters. Saran glanced at me, and his eyes flicked to the tablet, the flash drive, the bracelet. He saw enough to understand that the staff were not the only players in the room. The margin panel displayed. Pivot available. Convert authority into shield. I stepped forward and spoke in the formal cadence of corporate compliance, the tone that makes liars sweat. "Director Saran," I said, "I'm documenting a misuse of the concierge algorithm under donor pressure, including attempted reputational retaliation and unauthorized footage editing." I held up my phone, camera on, red recording dot blinking like a heartbeat. "If you escort me and my witnesses to a secure room, we can prevent the hotel from being complicit." Saran's throat bobbed. He looked at Harlow, then at me. He made his decision with the smallest nod. "This way," he said, and his voice carried the weight of a man choosing the lesser fire. Harlow's smile did not reach his eyes. "You think you've won," he said to me as we moved. "No," I said. "I think I've delayed losing. That was the most honest victory I knew how to claim." We hustled through the corridor, a strange procession of uniforms and secrets. In a service lounge off the main hallway, Saran locked the door and pulled down the blinds. Nara sent the files. Pim forwarded her time-stamped note to an encrypted drive, and I watched the margin bar fill like a glass finally receiving water. A new message appeared. "Protection unlocked. Narrative reframe." On my phone, my social media feed updated. The drafted headline about me vanished. In its place, a different story began to trend. Hotel AI accused of coercive profiling. It wasn't a clean win, but it redirected the spotlight away from my neck. Kiet returned 10 minutes later with Maris. The fixer looked like he'd been kept in a room designed for comfort with no intention of kindness. His shirt was rumpled, his eyes bloodshot, and his smile was as weary as a confession. "Lena," he said hoarsely, "you're alive." "Barely," I replied, "but I brought friends." Maris studied Nara, Kiet, Pim, and Saran. "That's not how the hotel usually does things," he murmured. "The hotel usually isolates," I said. "Isolation is cheaper." The margin panel chimed as if approving my sarcasm. Maris sat heavily and rubbed his face. "I tried to shut the system down," he admitted, "but it's wired into every department. The owners see it as a profit engine." Nara's voice was small but fierce. "My father sees it as a weapon." Pim crossed her arms. "And staff see it as a blade hovering over our paychecks." Saran's gaze dropped. "If this goes public," he said, "the hotel will claim it was one rogue employee." Everyone looked at me. It felt familiar. That moment when a room decides you are the convenient sacrifice. I laughed once. Not because it was funny, but because I refused to let the old reflex take over. "Then we make it impossible to name only one," I said. "We make the story too big to fit on my back." We needed a stage. The Eclipse Meridian was hosting a gala that evening, a glittering fundraiser for digital wellness, which sounded like a yacht trying to disguise itself as charity. Dr. Gray and Nara's father were both scheduled to speak. Investors, journalists, influencers, and politicians would gather in the ballroom like moths near a chandelier. If we wanted to stop the concierge system from devouring more people, we had to expose it where denial couldn't survive. The plan formed the way desperate plans do. Fast, messy, and fueled by adrenaline. Kiet would reroute the ballroom screens. Pim would distract the kitchen enough to keep staff from being punished mid-chaos. Saran would misplace the security team for 8 crucial minutes. Nara would stand on stage and tell the truth in her own name, which carried more weight than mine ever could. Maris would present the documentation, because as the fixer, he understood exactly how stories were cleaned, and therefore exactly how to stain them permanently. My job was to do what assistants do best, make the impossible look like it was scheduled. I spent the afternoon sprinting through service corridors, issuing calm instructions while my heart tried to escape my ribcage. The margin panel kept updating tasks. Reduce waste. Convert panic into procedure. Increase value. Coordinate allies. Avoid penalty. Do not become the headline. I wanted to scold the system for its tone, but I also wanted to hug it, which was probably a sign I needed more sleep and fewer plot twists. At 7:58 p.m., the ballroom shimmered with sequins, crystal, and the kind of laughter that never mentions consequence. I stood near the entrance with a tablet and a headset, wearing my assistant face. Pleasant, invisible, competent. Guests flowed past me like perfume in human form. Dr. Gray arrived in a tailored suit, his smile bright enough to be mistaken for kindness. Nara's father, Mr. Suthida, appeared beside him, a man whose handshake had probably ruined competitors without wrinkling his cuff. He spotted Nara, who was disguised again, and his eyes sharpened with anger and fear. Perfect. Fear makes people sloppy. On stage, the MC began praising the hotel's revolutionary concierge intelligence, and I watched the audience nod like obedient stockholders. The margin panel displayed, "Execute." My fingers trembled as I tapped Kiet's channel. "Now," I whispered. The lights dimmed for a slideshow. The screens flickered. For half a second, the hotel logo appeared, then dissolved into a dashboard of profiles, vulnerabilities, and manipulation scripts. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone laughed uncertainly, thinking it was edgy marketing. Then the screen displayed a clip. A guest being offered a comfort package precisely tailored to their private grief, their divorce, their addiction. The laughter died like a candle in rain. Nara walked onto the stage, ripping off her mask. Gasps scattered. She took the microphone with a hand that didn't shake. "My name is Nara Suthida," she said. "I am the daughter of the man who helped install this system. Tonight, I'm here to tell you that it has been used to coerce, to blackmail, and to destroy." Her father surged forward, face furious, but Saren's missing security had made him powerless in public. Dr. Gray stood frozen, his polished calm cracking at the edges. The room held its breath, and in that silence, I felt something loosen inside me. The belief that quiet is safer than truth. Maris stepped beside Nara and raised the flash drive like a tiny torch. "These are the raw logs," he said into a second microphone. "Unedited surveillance. Access trails. The scripts used to draft false headlines. The system didn't predict outcomes. It engineered them." Pim's testimony played next, her voice strong and steady as she described the dish that had been weaponized. The kitchen staff in the back of the ballroom, still in uniforms, straightened like a tide turning. Kiet's footage followed. A clean cut of the moment Maris was lured into Suite 4702, then the cut to black, then the hidden camera angle showing executives editing the feed. The crowd's reactions became a mosaic of horror and fascination, because scandal is the only sport that makes everyone feel righteous. "Mr. Suthida tried to seize the microphone, but Nara turned to him and spoke in a voice that carried over the ballroom like a bell. "Father," she said, "you taught me that money is leverage. You forgot to teach me that conscience is leverage too." His face went pale. Dr. Gray finally moved, stepping toward the stage with the slow confidence of a man accustomed to controlling rooms. "This is irresponsible," he said, voice tight. "You're exposing proprietary technology and jeopardizing a business that employs thousands." I stepped forward from the shadows, surprising myself with my own audacity. I took a microphone from a tray and said, "Employing thousands doesn't give you permission to profile them like inventory." Heads turned. I was not a famous daughter or a wealthy doctor. I was a woman in a blazer with a name tag. Yet the room listened, because sometimes the most alarming thing is a disposable person refusing to stay disposable. "You've been using comfort as a weapon," I continued, "and you've been relying on assistants, staff, and scapegoats to carry the risk. Tonight, we're handing the risk back to you." The margin panel chimed. "Narrative reframe successful." I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like someone who had finally stopped apologizing for taking up space. The aftermath was chaos dressed in formal wear. Phones lit up, messages flew, journalists pushed forward, and the hotel's PR team looked like they'd been hit by a truck made of hashtags. Mr. Suthida tried to retreat, but investors surrounded him with the polite, predatory attention of people who smell liability. Dr. Gray left the ballroom with his face fixed into a smile that looked painful to maintain. I knew he would fight back. Men like him treated consequences like a temporary inconvenience. Still, the first punch had landed, and it had landed publicly. In the service corridor afterward, we gathered around a metal table that smelled faintly of disinfectant. Nara sat with her head in her hands, shaking with delayed fear. Pim poured water into paper cups like she was distributing courage. Saran leaned against the wall, staring at his badge as if it had gained weight. Kiet paced, energized by the thrill of sabotage. Maris looked at me, exhaustion softening his features. "You did what I couldn't," he said quietly. "You made them look at the machine." I shrugged, my hands trembling now that the adrenaline was draining. I just refused to be the easiest story. The margin panel flashed, and for the first time, it displayed something that felt like praise. Milestone achieved, conversion of systemic waste into collective value. Underneath, another line appeared, smaller and stranger. Exit option available. A door icon hovered at the bottom of my vision like an invitation. "What does that mean?" I whispered. The system answered in the same calm elevator voice. "You have accrued enough margin to choose. Remain and reform. Or leave with your debts erased and your identity restored." My throat tightened. I could walk away. I could go back to my old life, my small apartment, my boring contracts, my careful routines. But I could also stay in this world where my refusal mattered. I looked at Nara, at Pim, at Kiet, at Saran, at Maris. They were all trapped in different ways. If I left, someone else would become the scapegoat. Maybe not immediately, but eventually. The machine always needed someone. I swallowed and said, "I'm staying." The door icon faded. The margin panel updated. New objective: dismantle the algorithm without burning the staff. The universe, as usual, did not believe in easy endings. The next weeks felt like living inside a boardroom storm. Auditors arrived. Lawsuits blossomed like mold. The hotel owners held emergency meetings with faces set into practice sympathy. Nara testified publicly, and her father's empire shook. Pim organized the staff like a union disguised as a cooking schedule. Saran leaked internal memos to protect the security team from being scapegoated. Maris turned his fixer skills into a weapon for truth, which made him dangerously rare. Kiet, somehow, became our unofficial tech lead, running cables through ceilings and leaving sarcastic sticky notes in server closets. My job expanded into something I'd never imagined. I became the person who translated between people who spoke money and people who spoke survival. The margin system guided me in strange ways, prompting me to document, to negotiate, to slow down when panic made us careless. It also did something I didn't expect. It showed me the costs I used to ignore. Every time a staff member stayed late without pay, the panel flashed. Unpaid labor detected. Every time a guest demanded a favor with a smile and no tip, the panel suggested, convert demand into written request. It was like having a conscience that spoke in bullet points. Eventually, we discovered the darkest truth. Margin wasn't magical at all. It was a hidden diagnostic layer of the concierge algorithm, designed to measure efficiency, compliance, and friction. Someone, maybe Maris, maybe an earlier victim, had altered it to reward resistance. The machine had been taught how to help us break it. I should have felt betrayed. Instead, I felt oddly grateful. Even systems built for harm can be repurposed when enough people refuse to behave as predicted. One night, long after the gala had been clipped into trending soundbites and debate panels, I sat alone in the employee lounge with a vending machine tea that tasted like plastic optimism. My phone buzzed with an unknown number, and my stomach tightened before I even answered. The voice on the other end was smooth, familiar, and infuriatingly calm. "Lena," Dr. Gray said, "congratulations. You've made yourself interesting." I stared at the cracked screen of my phone, watching my own reflection blink back. "If this is a congratulatory call, you're missing the part where you send flowers," I replied. He laughed softly. "Flowers are for apologies. I don't apologize." The margin panel flared. Manipulation attempt detected. Reassert boundary. I stood and walked toward the back stairwell, away from cameras and curious ears. "Then save both of us time," I said. "What do you want?" "A meeting," he answered. "Neutral ground. Tomorrow. I'll bring an offer." My instinct, the old careful instinct, begged me to say yes, to hear him out, to avoid conflict by absorbing it. Instead, I surprised myself again. "I'll meet you," I said. "But I'm choosing the ground." He paused. "Where?" "A street food stall," I replied. "No private rooms, no glass walls, no security theater. If you want to talk, you can smell frying garlic like the rest of humanity." His silence was the sound of someone encountering an inconvenience that money couldn't immediately smooth. "Very well," he said at last. "Send me the location." When the call ended, I realized my hands were shaking, but the shaking felt like heat, not helplessness. I wasn't afraid of him as a person. I was afraid of what his presence did to the stories around him. He turned people into side characters in their own lives. I refused to audition. The next afternoon, he arrived at the stall exactly on time, wearing a suit that looked absurd next to the plastic stools. People glanced at him, not because he was famous, but because he was visibly uncomfortable. That was my first small victory. He sat across from me, and between us the vendor placed 2 bowls of noodles like a peace offering. Dr. Gray did not touch his. "You've caused a measurable decline in the hotel's market confidence," he began. "You're going to be courted by activists and hunted by executives." I slurped my noodles loudly. "Sounds like a busy calendar," I said. His gaze tightened. "I can remove you from the board," he continued. "A clean exit. I'll pay your debts. I'll offer you a role in my company. High salary, global travel, full legal protection." The words should have dazzled me. Old me would have seen them as escape hatch, golden and airtight. But I had already learned the cost of golden things. They weigh you down until you stop moving. "What's the catch?" I asked. He exhaled, as if explaining gravity to a child. "You stop attacking the concept of predictive compliance," he said. "You publicly call the system a misunderstanding. You let the narrative settle." I set my spoon down gently. "So you want me to lie?" I said. "I want you to be practical," he corrected. "Truth is expensive." I met his eyes, keeping my voice even. "Truth is only expensive for people who profit from the lie," I said. The vendor, overhearing nothing but tone, refilled our water cups anyway, like he was keeping the world hydrated through other people's power struggles. Dr. Gray's smile returned, thin. "You think you're immune to incentives," he said, "but you're still an assistant in a blazer. You're still replaceable." The sentence was meant to land like a weight. It landed like a reminder. I nodded once. "Yes," I said, "I am replaceable. That's why the system worked for so long. It relies on an endless supply of people who can't afford to push back." I leaned forward. "But here's what you're missing. Replaceable doesn't mean disposable. It means the position is common. And if the position is common, then change spreads faster than you think." The margin panel flickered, showing a new metric. Fear converted to clarity. Dr. Gray's eyes hardened. "You're making this personal," he said. I shook my head. "You made it personal when you tried to write my headline," I replied. "I'm just refusing to be edited." He stood, leaving untouched noodles behind like a symbol of his inability to swallow ordinary life. "You'll regret this," he said quietly. I looked at the steam rising from my bowl. "Maybe," I answered, "but regret is cheaper than surrender." After he walked away, Nara slid onto the stool beside me, having watched from the other side of the stall with sunglasses and a laugh she tried to hold in. "Street food diplomacy," she teased. "That's one way to humble a billionaire." I wiped chili from my lips. "It's not about humbling him," I said. "It's about making sure he can't make me smaller." Nara's smile faded into something thoughtful. "I wish I'd learned that earlier," she admitted. I nudged her shoulder. "You learned it now," I said. "That's earlier than never." A week later, Dr. Gray tried again, not with offers, but with rumor. Anonymous posts appeared, claiming Nara had staged the gala to tank her father's stock for revenge, and that I had extorted the hotel for a payout. The accusations spread because they were tidy and cruel, the kind of story people share to feel superior. The margin panel didn't panic. It suggested a response plan with the cold efficiency of a fire drill. We countered with receipts, time-stamped emails, verified access logs, witness statements from staff across departments. Pim organized a press briefing in the kitchen, of all places, because she said journalists deserved to smell the labor they wrote about. Saran opened the surveillance archive to an independent investigator. Maris released his own statement, naming names with the precision of a man who had learned that silence protects predators more than victims. Kiet built a public dashboard that let anyone see which claims were verified and which were manufactured, and he made the interface so simple that even influencers could use it without reading the manual. Watching the rumor collapse felt like watching a wave retreat. It didn't erase the damage entirely, but it proved something important. A lie needs lonely targets. When targets stand together, the lie has to find a new appetite. On a humid Thursday, after the third court injunction and the fifth sleepless night, the hotel's owners offered me a deal. They sat across from me in a conference room lined with art that looked like it had been purchased to impress other art. Their lead lawyer spoke first. "Miss Caillou," she said, pronouncing my name carefully as if it might stain her tongue. "You've become an unexpected figure in this situation. We'd like to offer you a settlement and a promotion, a senior position in compliance innovation, generous salary, non-disclosure agreement. We can make this go away." The old me, the careful me, would have taken it. A stable job, good money, no more fear. But the new me had seen too much. I looked at the NDA on the table, thick as a brick. The margin panel flickered. Offer is waste disguised as value. I smiled. You want me to sign away the story, I said. You want to buy back the silence you've been selling. The lawyer's smile tightened. We want resolution. I leaned forward. Resolution is not the same as erasure, I replied. Here's my counteroffer. You will dismantle predictive profiling entirely. You will fund an independent oversight board with staff representation, and you will provide severance packages for any employee who wants to leave without retaliation. In exchange, I will not advocate for criminal charges beyond what the prosecutors already pursue. The owners exchanged looks, irritation, sharpening. You're overreaching, one said. I tilted my head. I'm finally reaching it all, I corrected. Silence thickened. Then, surprisingly, the oldest owner sighed. What do you want, really? He asked. I thought about my old life, the cramped office, the contracts, the apology to furniture. I thought about Lena Cayo's debt and how it had been designed to keep her small. I want people to stop using desperation as a discount, I said. The room stayed quiet long enough for the words to sink in. In the end, they didn't accept everything. Power never does. But they conceded enough to create cracks. And cracks are where light gets in, even in buildings made of marble and denial. A year later, the Eclipse Meridian still stood above the city, but it was different. The concierge system had been stripped down to logistics, audited by independent teams, and forbidden from psychological profiling. It was not perfect, and neither were we. Pim ran the staff council like a general with a smile. Saran taught security recruits that cameras should protect the vulnerable, not the powerful. Kiet quit being a bellhop and started a small cybersecurity firm that specialized in ethical sabotage, which sounded like a contradiction until you met him. Nara left her father's empire and founded a nonprofit that funded scholarships for service workers' children, because she insisted leverage should travel downward for once. Maris finally stopped vanishing into other people's messes. He took a public role overseeing crisis transparency, which made him terrifying to executives and beloved by staff. As for me, I resigned on a Tuesday, because dramatic resignations are a waste of time. I walked out of the hotel wearing the same black blazer, but my posture felt different. The margin panel appeared one last time, now faint, almost shy. Your margin is positive, it said. You have converted waste into value. A final prompt blinked. Would you like to archive this narrative? I hesitated, then tapped yes. The panel dissolved like mist. The world stayed. I breathed in the warm street air and laughed. Not sharp this time, but relieved. I hadn't become a princess, a chosen one, or a flawless